want to just focus on problems. I really want to talk about solutions, about some of the programs that we have in place. I'm a strong believer of looking at students' strengths rather than their deficits. So I'm hoping to share that with you today, and also just to answer any questions that you have about LAUSD and the work that I do. So I like this quote, and if you read it, I think it talks to how important our work is. You know, a lot of times you'll hear educators complain about, you know, what do you expect from us? Look at the kids that are coming to us. You know, they come to us without speaking English. Their parents are not familiar with our educational system. You hear a lot of negative talk about some of the students that are in our school district. But really, I think that knowing that as educators, we need to do a better job. Our work is even more important because we're working with the students that, for them, this is an opportunity. Getting an education is their probably only opportunity to get out of poverty, to live a comfortable life, to know what it's like to be in this country where they have choices and options. So I'm really excited to share, you know, what we do. Dr. Rose already told you everything that you need to know about me, but I'll say it again. I am the daughter of immigrant parents from Mexico who came to this country to basically find work so that they could pull themselves out of poverty and raise a family. I'm one of 5 siblings, and I love school. I'm a product of LAUSD. Loved elementary school, loved middle school. In middle school, I was a cheerleader, I was student council, leadership, gymnastics, you name it, all the sports, everything. I loved middle school. And then something happened when I transitioned to high school. Most of my friends went to a different school, not our neighborhood school. A lot of my friends went to private school. So when I got to Hollywood High School, and that's why you see Hollywood High sheets there, I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't really understand why kids went to school. I really thought my whole life that the reason why kids went to school was because their parents were working during the day. And what else can you do? I mean, it was kind of like a babysitting service. It was a place where you wouldn't get into trouble and, you know, make friends. But I didn't realize that the reason why we went to school was so that we can get an education, so that it would prepare us for our future, so that we can find our dreams and hopes and things that we were interested in doing through education. I didn't understand that. So I had been working at Kentucky Fried Chicken part-time in the evenings, and one day the manager said, you know, we'd like for you to work full-time. You know, are you interested? And my biggest goal then was, I want to buy a car. I want to save money and I want to buy a car. So when I got offered a full-time job at Kentucky Fried Chicken, I was like, absolutely yes. And they said, well, the only problem is it's during the day. It's full-time during the day, and I was going to school, and I said, that's not a problem. I don't like school. I'd way rather work. So I went home and I told my parents that I was going to quit school and work full-time, and my parents were really okay with it. They thought as a young girl I would probably most likely end up marrying someone who would take care of me, and that it didn't matter if I finished high school. The expectation was that I should stay out of trouble, you know, certainly not be promiscuous or do anything bad, but as long as I was a good girl and working, and there wasn't an issue with that. So that's when I ended my schooling in LAUSD. I stopped going to high school and I never went back. So I think I was there for a week or two and then working full-time at Kentucky Fried Chicken. And it also just happened that I met a boy, you know, and my father was a very strict Mexican man who said, no, we don't do that. You don't get to date men. You know, maybe when you're 18 we'll think about it, but not at 15. So my father wouldn't let me date, and being the stubborn, you know, person that I am, I said, okay, well, you're not going to let me you're not going to let me date him, so I'll just marry him. So we basically took off and we eloped. We went to get married. I was 15 and he was 19, and we went to City Hall right here in LA. And they wouldn't marry us because I was too young. They said, the only way we can marry you is if you're pregnant. And I thought, well, that could happen, but it'll take too long, so I don't want to wait. So one of my friends told me that we could go to Las Vegas, and that in Las Vegas they would marry us. So that's what we did. We drove to Las Vegas. My sister and her boyfriend came as witnesses, and we got married. And that's what I thought was great. I was married, I was working at Kentucky Fried Chicken, he was working at Los Burritos. Of course, when we got back home, my father disowned me, would not speak to me. It was difficult then. You know, my whole family was told they shouldn't talk to me because I disgraced family. But, you know, things worked out. Turns out, I got pregnant right away with my firstborn. So at 16, I gave birth to my first child, Bruce. And as soon as Bruce was born, I knew something was wrong because suddenly all these people ran in the room, and I saw like more nurses and more doctors, and the room was suddenly very crowded. And you know, being a teenager, I had no idea if this was normal, but I had a sense, and I said, "What's wrong? Is he okay, or is it okay?" I didn't even know what it was. And she said, "Well, he's kicking his leg, so I think he's going to be okay." And at that age, I thought, if that's a good sign, something's not right here. So what I did end up finding out is my child was removed and taken right away to Children's Hospital because he was born with spina bifida. Does anybody know what spina bifida is? So it's a neural tube defect where your spinal cord doesn't completely develop, and it's also known as an open spine. And so Bruce had a lot of damage to his spinal cord. And they took him to the hospital. He went right away into surgery to close his spine. And then it happened. Then suddenly all the help, everybody was coming to talk to me, to tell me what was wrong with my child. And what they told me was that he will never walk, he will never sit up. He had spina bifida and developed hydrocephalus, so he had water on the brain. They didn't know how much brain damage. And they basically said, you know, he's going to be very disabled. And so then the social workers started coming in, and people were trying to help me to understand what was going on. I didn't understand anything. I was 16 years old. I just knew that my son had a lot of problems. I didn't know if he was going to live. And I just, you know, was scared, basically. But finally, thank God, Bruce did well. He had the surgery. The first years of his life, he had about 10 more operations because he kept rejecting the shunt that would drain the fluid from his brain. Eventually, though, he was doing okay. He was, you know, doing well. And, but I started taking him to regular medical appointments. I would take him to a spina bifida clinic at Children's Hospital. And then I started to get to know all the doctors at the clinic. There was a neurologist, there was a urologist, there was a pediatrician, there was a physical therapist, there was a social worker, there were all of these people there, occupational therapists, and I was lost. And I remember saying to myself, I am never going to be able to raise this child and do a good job as a mother unless I go back to school and get an education, because I don't understand anything that's going on. I didn't know the difference between a urologist and a urologist, and that's what motivated me to go back to school. So as Linda said, I went back to a community college. In the meantime, I had 3 more children while I was in the community college. So I had 3 children plus my son Bruce, who had a lot of medical problems. And I was working full-time. And, you know, I did it. It took me 10 years. I say I should have got a PhD out of LACC because I was there a very, very long time. But I managed to move on. And I told myself, no matter what, I'm going to finish school. And you have to realize, when I dropped out of school, everybody was okay. When I told my family, I'm going back to school, they were like, ahora quieres estudiar. Which means like, oh, now you want to go to school. Now you're a mother, you have a sick child, what are you thinking? How are you going to go back to school? I had a husband who was crazy jealous, and he thought, well, what do you mean? He was also very strict, Mexican. How are you going to go to school? You're a mother, you're my wife, all of that. But something in my head said I need to go back to school, and that's what motivated me. I went and I transferred to, after I got out, I transferred to UCLA as an undergrad, as a Chicana and women's studies major. It was a funny thing though, because when I got into UCLA the first time, I had no idea it was competitive. You have to remember, before I went to college, I thought, you know, I had never set foot, nobody in my family had ever gone to college. And so when I went to college, and I applied at LACC, you just put your little application in. And I put my application into UCLA, and when I got in and people started congratulating me, I thought everybody got it. I really didn't know the difference. That was the extent of my ignorance. And I think that people in education need to realize that not all of our students are exposed to college or have the opportunity to know what the system is like. When I kept going on in school, my father kept saying, I thought you graduated. When I left LACC, now you're going to UCLA? Yeah, now I'm going to UCLA, now I'm going to get my BA, okay. So he came to that graduation. Then it was like, then I went on to get a master's, and it was like, well, I thought you already graduated. Are you sure you graduated? So our families are confused, and we need to do a lot of educating. And I just noticed Tina Christie's here in the room. I'm so happy to be here. So many people that helped me through doing this program. It's amazing. So anyways, that's what my story is. I did go on to get an MSW and then got into education and decided to get my doctorate. It was the best choice I ever made. So the people here in the room, just to get a sense, how many of you are in the master's program? Doctorate program? Oh, great. And the rest of you are done and just here? Come back, great. Well, how nice to see all of you. It's really an honor. So let me tell you more about LAUSD. So as any of you work for LAUSD? Welcome. Lots of change, lots happening in LAUSD. So, LAUSD is a huge district, and we have all kinds of children there, all colors, all languages, lots of students with disabilities, lots of children that, majority of whom are living in poverty, face a lot of challenges. I can tell you half the time when I interacted with some of the students that I interacted with, I was amazed they ever showed up. I was like, I didn't know how they did it. We had kids that were homeless, that were crossing over, attics, injecting themselves, and still going to school, because the school was a safe place for them. So, in order to say that we have a lot of challenges, the district is huge, 710 square miles. It's about half the size of Rhode Island, if you think of it that way. And we have a budget of over $6.47 billion, excuse me. So we are a very large district. Did it change? I guess it didn't hit the right one. Okay. Just to give you a little bit more information, we have, for the 2012-13 year classes, we had over 15,700 students that dropped out of school. Almost 32,000 students that are chronically absent, meaning they're missing more than 10 days of school in a school year. Over 13,000 students that are homeless, and those are the students that actually indicate that on their enrollment form. Homelessness is a stigma that a lot of families and students don't want to walk up to somebody and say, I'm homeless. And over 9,000 foster youth. And I also want to say, if anybody at any time has a question or a comment, this is a small group, so please feel free to, I hope that's okay. I know you have the mic, but let's make it a dialogue. So as Linda also said, I'm the Executive Director of Student Health and Human Services, and I oversee a lot of programs. But the primary mission of Student Health and Human Services is really to address barriers that prevent students from doing well in school. Because what I always tell everybody is I don't care how rigorous the instructional program is, how fantastic the teacher is, they can't teach to an empty seat. And they can't teach to students that are dealing with such trauma at home. You have a student whose mother was just beaten up and put in the hospital, father was arrested, kids are pulled out of the home, and the next day to assume that that student's going to be able to sit in the classroom and learn is not very logical. So we're there to address the barriers that a lot of our students face to getting an education. I oversee health education, nursing services, pupil services, school mental health, all of our medical services and community partnerships. All of these again aimed at providing health services. We have over 500 nurses, just to give you an idea, in LAUSD, that are providing diabetic students with insulin. We have students with disabilities that need to be catheterized or that need to have suction. Just about everything, you name it, we have. A lot of different types of needs. In our pupil services is where we have all of our dropout prevention work, the attendance work, the homeless population, the foster youth, students on permits. School mental health, we have an amazing team. We have over 300 social workers that are really providing mental health services. So we have clinics that provide mental health, but we also have wellness centers. We have 14 wellness centers throughout the district, and these are state-of-the-art, beautiful centers that we have where we offer free medical services, physical exams, mental health services, and dental in some of them. And they're open not only to our students on the site, but they also have an outside access to the community, so anybody in the community can come in and take advantage of them. We also have a wellness plan, and this is kind of our blueprint of looking at the whole child. And as I said, so we're not just looking at, you know, of course when you're in a school district, your primary focus is making sure that students graduate. But in order to get them to graduate, there's a lot of things that need to happen. And so we have a whole wellness plan where we're teaching and reinforcing social, emotional life skills, making sure that children are learning nonviolent resolution skills, that they are able to self-regulate, control themselves, you know, respect other people. So all of this in our wellness is health education, it's mental health services, it's engaging parents, it's instruction, it's everything that you need to do in order for a child to learn. So our philosophy is kind of, you have to have all of these things for all children, but then we tier it out because you're going to have some students that are well adjusted, even though they're living in poverty, even though they have some other problems at home, that don't need as much support as other students that may be under the same circumstances. So we have a lot of at-risk youth and specialized programs to support students that need that extra support. So one of the ones I want to talk about is our unaccompanied youth program. I don't know how many of you have been following the news with a lot of our unaccompanied minors that have been coming to this country from El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico, and we've had children very young coming into our country. In fact, Los Angeles has the highest number of people from Guatemala and El Salvador living here than anywhere else in the world. So naturally, those children that are coming across trying to reunite with family would be coming to Los Angeles. We had a huge increase in these unaccompanied youth that came to register in our schools. And most of them are male. And these are students that, I think the youngest student that we had was 7 years old, who came here, crossed the border illegally, you know, with a coyote, experienced some trauma coming across, and we have some ways of supporting those students. So one of the things that we found with these youth that have come across here, they are showing certain symptoms, and usually they're afraid to enroll in school because they're afraid of authority. They think somebody's going to say that they're undocumented. They're dealing with a lot of separation anxiety and grief. These are oftentimes students whose parents, maybe mother, came here several years before to work, left their child behind with a family member, maybe a grandparent, and then the student, you know, gets into that teenage years and starts feeling upset and wants to connect with the parent and is saying, well, where's my mom or where's my dad and why did they abandon me? So they have a lot of issues oftentimes coming across the border. We have girls who were sexually abused in their home country and as well as crossing the border. We had a middle school student that presented pregnant at one of our centers who was sexually abused while crossing the border. We had a lot of children that have sustained trauma in their country, and that's why they're trying to come over here. They're trying to escape the violence and trauma in their own countries. So in LAUSD, we have a policy that says we welcome all children with open arms. We don't care if you're documented or not. Not that we don't care, but we don't ask. You know, we're not concerned if you're undocumented. We have a bulletin and policy that went out from my office to all schools saying you will enroll these students immediately. even if they have no paperwork. I don't care if you have a 10-year-old present by themselves in a school wanting to enroll. The idea is to enroll them. It's better, the safest place they can be is in school, where we can get them resources and support rather than to send them back out to the street. So that's our policy in LAUSD. And we also have a school enrollment placement center. And this is a center where we offer kind of a one-stop shop, where we offer recent immigrant support. So we have doctors there, nurses, we provide physical exams, we give them the immunizations that they need in order to enroll in school. We help them with the enrollment papers. If you ever see the paperwork, it's like this, you know, because I was there the first week helping kids enroll. We had a line around the block of recent immigrants wanting to enroll in our schools. Nancy was one of the counselors that was working at the center, and you know, horrific stories, but you know what's amazing is the resiliency in these children and families. And they come and they're so full of joy and hope and excited to be in America, and will do well because they're very, very strong. So we have that center where we support them and help them get back into school. One of the things that I'm really excited about that we started this year through the new way that we're funded, so the, what is it, LCAP, so the local control funding formula, we get more money for students that are in poverty, which are most of our students, students that are English language learners, and students that are in foster care. So we got additional money, and my division was in charge of developing and implementing a program for foster youth. And I have to say that with over 9,000 students in foster youth, we really developed a comprehensive plan. And the reason why I think it's really good is because we involved all of the people that are working with foster youth. We went to DCFS, we went to some of the other organizations that were supporting foster youth and said, you're the experts, what do we need to do in order to support these students? And what they really said is they needed case management. You know, they were moving around a lot, changing schools. We needed to work with their caregivers, and we needed to train our staff in terms of the new laws around supporting foster youth, because foster youth don't necessarily have to meet all of the district's graduation requirements. They just have to meet the state's requirements. So making sure they get credit if they're moving around, partial credit for different classes that they took in. So this is the first time that we really have a comprehensive program for foster youth, and every single foster youth in our district has a counselor or social worker that's doing an assessment, figuring out what their needs are, looking at how, whether or not they're on track to graduate, and helping them through the system. We also have something called a camp returnee program. These are the students that are coming out of juvenile hall and some of the delinquency, what are they called? We all call them the camps. The halls, the camps. And you know, we had a big problem. You know, there were so many children that were our children, LAUSD children, that have been detained and in camp. And the problem that we were having, as soon as they got out of school, there was a lot of recidivism. They were going back into the camps. They get out of the camps, they go to school to register, and the school would say, hey, you're not coming here, you know, you look like a gangster, I thought I already kicked you out, you know, I OT'd you. And again, we changed the policy. And nobody can be turned away, that we make the placements at our central office, unless it's a safety issue or there's a real legitimate issue. We want students that are coming out of camps to be able to engage in school. What we also did is we didn't wait until they got out of school to come up with the plan. So we're working with probation, we're working with LACO, and we're saying as soon as an LAUSD student is arrested, we're sharing information. So they're letting us know as soon as a student is arrested and will be detained, and from the time they start, and we know they're going to be there 30, 60, 90 days, we start planning on what we're going to do when they get out. We have follow-up care, we have social workers working with them, and we're making sure that when they get out, we have a place for them, and that we have people that are following up and doing the work. A lot of these kids, you know, when they come out of the camps, they're, you know, gang involved. There are sometimes safety issues. They've experienced trauma. You know, sometimes they have behavioral problems, and it's hard on the teachers. They need support as well. They're failing academically. They've been behind. So there are a lot of reasons why sometimes, you know, staff is resistant. but we are training them to say, no, we need to accept all of our students. Again, this is more information about our homeless population. California was hit really hard with the recession, and a lot of our, a lot of people in Los Angeles ended up homeless, mainly due to loss of employment. LA is an expensive place to live, for any of you who haven't noticed. You know, our rents are higher than most other places. 74% of our homeless are unsheltered, so actually living out on the streets. If you ever go to Skid Row and walk around, and that was one of the things when we were in getting our master's in social welfare, we were required to go in teams and take tours of all of the shelters and understand what was taking place downtown. And it's really an interesting, thing to see if you do that. Of course, if you don't have a home, if you don't have your basic needs being met, you're going to have a hard time learning. You don't need a lot of research to tell you that. It's kind of common sense. A lot of these children are behind, sometimes placed in special education, do poorly on their tests. Many of these students don't graduate from high school. I mean, I can go on and on. They experience a lot of challenges. And one of the things that I find really sad is that sometimes people think that the homeless population are more of our older kids, some of our teenagers. But if you look at this, you can see that a lot of our students are in elementary school. It's really sad when you see kindergarten, primary school children that are living out on the streets with their parents, and yet they come to school. That's the amazing thing to me, is they know like school is the one place where they can come, where they can get food, where they can get some support. We're looking at data. If a student has poor attendance, if they're failing math and English, if they have behavioral problems, there's a 90% chance that that third grader is going to end up dropping out of school if we don't do something to intervene. And I think that's the thing that we need to think about as educators, is what are we doing and how are we supporting these students that are so at risk? And some of the things that we can do don't cost any money. That's the thing, is that I think there's this level of hopelessness out there that, well, what can we do? Look at the kids that we're dealing with, instead of thinking of what are their strengths, what are their dreams, what are their hopes, and what can we do so that they graduate from school. So one of the things that we did is I'm a strong believer in partnerships, because I don't think any one agency can manage this work on their own. The school district cannot do this alone. This is a problem. The issues of poverty, substance abuse, violence, I mean, those are issues in the community. The school district is just a microcosm of everything else that exists out there. So the city did this research, and they found out that of the 100,000 youth between the ages of 16 and 24, 1 in 5 are out of school and out of work. 1 in 5. So when we were going out looking to recover students and to re-engage them back in school, we found these youth that were basically sitting at home watching TV, not happy, not knowing where they can go, unable to find work, because with the recession, a lot of the work that they were getting was now going to adults or older people that actually had, a high school diploma. And so what we did was we created this partnership with the city of LA, and we talked about how we could re-engage the children of LA, the youth of LA, back into schools. And one of the problems that we had is, the city manager came to me and he said, well, we have these beautiful facilities. I don't know how many of you have heard of youth source centers, family source centers. These are city facilities that get a lot of money, and their whole point is to provide services to students and families. And the outcomes that they're trying to achieve are to lift people out of poverty and get them to improve their academic outcomes. So graduating from high school or going into a training where they can get a job. And so we were working on the same thing, and I said to this man, Robert Sines, I said, Robert, I have a list of 20,000 students right here on my desk that are kids that have dropped out of school that we're looking for, that we want to re-engage. But I can't give you that information. Does anybody know why I can't share information that I have about our students? FERPA. FERPA, the federal, privacy protection laws, which is a good thing, but sometimes it can be a challenge with that. So we started talking and meeting about what we could do, and we said, well, how about if we place our LAUSD counselors at your sites? And then they'll have the list, they'll have access to our student information system electronically. They can go on, if a student walks into one of your centers and see their enrollment history, they can see how far off track they were from graduating. You can then connect them to resources and help them. And so we started this program, and we've had a lot of success about it. We've actually been going across the country. It's been looked at as a national model now of the city and the school districts working together. From that, we have now our counselors who are working with all of the other counselors in our district and referring kids to these centers. We also did something different with it. I don't know how many of you are aware, a few years back, people were complaining about the number of students that were receiving a ticket from law enforcement if they were caught truant. And a lot of the community advocates were outraged, because not only were they outraged that sometimes kids were walking to school and they were late and somebody would give them a ticket while they were like just about ready to enter the school ground, but they were also really angry because there was a discrepancy. More African American and Latino students were being ticketed than any other students. And so the community rightfully was really upset about it and was protesting, and I went to our police chief and I said, why don't we do something different? You know, we have a problem with giving these kids tickets. We're giving them tickets, it ties up the court system can't manage it. Parents have to miss a day of work to go to court with their child. The kid needs to miss another day of school. How about instead of us giving them a ticket, we give them a ticket that they don't have to go to court to clear, but they have to go to one of these centers. So that's what we do now. For all of our students, we no longer give truancy tickets. They give them a ticket, and the way to clear it is they have to go to one of these resource centers. And then at the resource centers, you have one of our counselors that does a whole academic assessment, social assessment, looks at what some of the issues are, and then engages them in some of the city programs. We took it a step further with an arrest diversion program because, as many of you know too, the other problem is that we have a lot of our children of color are being pushed into the juvenile justice system. That was an example of our truancy tickets. We give them a ticket, they wouldn't go to court, then it would, more fines would be imposed on them, they'd get in more trouble, they weren't able to drive, the courts were being tied up, and our kids were being pushed into the juvenile justice system. So we did the same thing with an arrest diversion. We took kids that had minor infractions, like they got into a fight, or things that could be handled administratively that you don't really need to involve law enforcement, and we referred them to these centers as well. So this is a really good program. We have a lot of great data to support it, that the kids are showing up, they're getting connected to resources, there's a carrot where they can get them city jobs, so there's a lot of good things coming out of it. I mentioned chronic absenteeism, and this is actually what I did my dissertation on, because I was just appalled at how much kids miss school, and I was really appalled by the fact that our kindergartners have the highest rate of chronic absenteeism of all kids in the district, and it's not just in LA, but around nationally this is a problem, and in LAUSD our chronic absentee rate is double that in other places, double the national level with our kindergartners. So I was really concerned about that. I knew that attendance leads students to, not doing well in school, leads them to becoming dropouts. And we had so many students missing school, I wanted to learn more about it. So good thing that we do in LAUSD, and I'm sure you've heard about our MISIS crisis. It's a big problem. Right now our data is pretty screwed up, but we were doing a good job collecting data and looking at attendance by grade level, by ethnicity, disaggregating it. Because we used to say, oh, we're doing great. We have a 96% attendance rate when you look at the aggregate. But then when you break it down and you start looking at it, and you see that our African American students are missing more than any other students, and that our kindergartners and 9th graders have horrible attendance, you start to realize that we need to have a program in place to address that. So we implemented a lot of different things to improve attendance, and we had great success with that, really to address chronic absenteeism in K and 9th grade, but all grade levels got different amounts of support. And really what we realized is that there's an urgent need that, that we need to apply to make sure kids are coming to school every single day. And one thing that we needed to do was analyze the data and break it down and know where the problem was. We needed to teach and reinforce good attendance habits, because you talk to different people. What's good attendance? How many days can you miss school? What's acceptable and what isn't? And when does it begin to impact your education? A lot of parent education, especially with kindergartners. Anybody have any young children? Any of you ever keep them out of school for inconvenience? I've had so many people tell me, I mean, it's not just your poor, I can't tell you how many parents would call my office outraged because we sent them a notice of truancy letter because their child was missing so much school because they were going to take them on a business trip. Or they were going to travel and this was the best time to do it, and thought that they were going to learn a lot more going to Italy than being in LAUSD in a classroom. But it impacts a lot of people, and so we really needed to educate parents on how it impacts, how attendance really is related to whether or not children are successful in school. The sad thing is that it's really children in poverty that are more impacted by poor attendance, because more affluent parents, they're reading to their children, they're supplementing their education, they're getting them tutoring, they're taking them on trips to museums and other ways of learning. Their vocabulary is higher before they even start school. We all know that, so they're doing okay. So one of the things that I would say to anybody who's an educator is when you're working with children that are in poverty, that face a lot of challenges, that have a lot of barriers, that aren't as entitled as other children or don't have as many resources, is that we really need to promote resiliency. Anybody familiar with all of the resiliency research? And I mean, one caring adult can make a huge difference in a child's life. One caring adult. I'm sure for many of you, you can think of that one caring adult that probably made a huge difference, whether it was a parent, whether it was a janitor, a teacher, a faith-based, person, but having that, having those supportive relationships, and people that have high expectations for you. And that's the challenge of working in districts like LAUSD, is that constant reminder of telling people, what you expect of our youth, that's what you're going to get. Because kids are not stupid. They know if you believe in them or not. And so if you want your children to be successful, you have to genuinely believe that they can make it. And that some children are going to need a lot more support than others. But that given that support, given that guidance, they can make it. So we're really believers in promoting resiliency and having opportunities for children to have meaningful participations, and then there's the internal factors. Children that are socially competent, that they they have problem-solving skills. A lot of these things is why we're doing now the social emotional learning as part of our core waivers, because we're finding, if you read any of the research on adverse childhood experiences and the impact that it has not only on their education and their ability to learn, but on their health. You're more likely to have a heart attack. You're more likely to have physical health what's the word? Ailments? Is that a word?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're more likely to suffer from that if you've had 3 or more adverse childhood experiences. Trauma in the family, violence in the family, substance abuse, those types of things. And so what we do is we tier out our work. I mentioned this before, but really, even for some kids, they're just resilient. For whatever reason, they have those things in their life. There's an innate ability for them to spring back and do well, and they have some support. Maybe they have that one caring adult, that teacher or that uncle or somebody is giving them that support. But what we found is that children that suffer from a lot of trauma, there's still like 25 to 30% of them that are going to need additional support. They're not just going to get over it. It's not like, okay, you had trauma in your life, forget about it, get over it, get strong. They're going to need some additional support, and that's what we want to provide. We want to provide supportive settings, an environment that feels safe, where they know they can come to school and not have to worry about being hurt. And we tier it up. So we do the base for everyone, and then at the very tip of the triangle are those services that we need to really focus on for students that are very much at risk. And so we're also teaching our staff to think more through a trauma lens and to not think about, oh, this child's such a pain, look what they're doing, what's wrong with you, why do you act this way, to thinking more about what happened to you. You know, thinking that way. Why is a child, you know, normal children don't just, you know, get up and pick up a bat and hit another kid over the head. You know, instead of saying, what is wrong with you, are you crazy, it's to think, what happened to you? What are the circumstances in your life, and what type of violence and trauma have you experienced that led you to that action? And so, again, that's why we have all of the teaching of our social, emotional skills, teaching children about empathy and conflict resolution and anger management and impulse control. And unfortunately, you know, we used to, a few years back, the district used to get a lot of money. We had huge programs. For those of you from the district, if you remember our impact programs, we had a lot of resources. We gave stipends to teachers, we had Second Step, we had a lot of programs where we were teaching children. Because the problem that people sometimes think is you do like an awareness campaign and you talk about child safety for 1 week or you do something like that, and that's not going to change behavior. If you want to change behavior, it has to be consistent. And children need to have the opportunity to learn these skills. They have to be able to practice these skills. And it has to be consistent through kindergarten through 12th grade. Because in kindergarten, what you learn is going to be a little bit different than what you learn when you're in high school about dating violence, about substance abuse, about being, you know, empathetic to your peer, about bullying, about, you know, not name calling, you know. So all of those things are really important things for us to do. And now that we have, again, the core waiver, we're bringing some of these things back. So we're going to be bringing back our Second Step and some of the social emotional learning programs and our anti-bullying programs. And I'm really excited that we're going to be doing that, because if you also look at the data, which I get all of the crisis calls in LAUSD. So anytime anything happens, a student is involved in a car accident, there's a shooting, there's a death of a child, there's an employee that's been arrested, I mean, anything. I get those crisis calls. And then I look at all of the data to look at trends and to try to see what's going on. And, you know, when you look at, starting like in 2008, you'll see that a lot of the suicide attempts, a lot of the suicide completion, a lot of the hospitalization of students and faculty, a lot of the reports that we get increased as soon as we cut back. In 2008, when we cut back on a lot of the programs, the support programs, the mental health services, the social emotional learning skills, it shows. You know, when you make those kind of cuts, it's going to have an impact, and I'm glad to see that they're finally coming back. So that's my presentation to you. I'm happy to take any questions, or if anybody else, I'm sure a lot of you are practitioners and have great things that you'd like to share about what you're doing with your students or in your schools. So I'd like to open it up.
So questions? Jennifer.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. I was wondering if you could speak a little more about, I gather your dissertation was specifically about a parent engagement intervention for chronic absenteeism. Did that cover it?
Not exactly. No, I'll tell you what it is, though.
Okay.
I was really interested in an attendance improvement program that we started. And I was really curious why at some schools in very similar demographic areas, they had great success in improving attendance. Great success. Like, these were schools that had the worst attendance in the district in some of the poorest neighborhoods. And they went from being so far from meeting our performance meter for attendance to being above it, to meeting it or going beyond. And then we had other schools not far away that they all made gains, but these schools may have improved by 2 or 3 percentage points. And why did one school go up like 50% and this other school went up only 2%? So what was that about? And that's what I was interested in, that's what I studied, and that's what Tina Christie over here helped me, was amazingly helpful in doing this. So what I did was I interviewed principals, teachers, and counselors where this attendance improvement was being implemented, and I wanted to figure out what was different. Why did some schools do well and others didn't? And really what I found out, what it really came down to, was this. One, of course, it's always the leadership at the school. So if they had a very strong principal that was involved and let everybody know that we are going to do something about attendance, that was one area, the principal, the leadership. The other area was the perception of the staff, of the students and families that they were serving. So the schools that did really well, even though their students had the same type of problems, same type of behavior, even though they acknowledged that, they also saw their strengths. They would say things. I remember going to one principal that I was going to interview. I was scheduled to interview her, and there was a shooting right in front of that campus the day before. And so I called her up to just say, well, you sure you want to still do this interview? Because I'm sure you have the media, everybody's over. She's like, oh no. Come on over, we've got everything under control. That wasn't one of our students, we're a great school over here. So, I mean, she saw the strengths of her community, and so did the teachers. And they didn't focus on just the deficits or the problems, but really felt that these children had strengths and believed in them. The other thing was the level of parent involvement was a big issue that impacted student attendance. And I think those were the key findings that I found, is that we need to believe in our children, we need to have staff involved. The other was teacher involvement. Because I can tell you, I was shocked. When I did this research, I was the director of pupil services. I was the person in charge of attendance for our whole district. And I would sit down with teachers and tell them who I was. I mean, everything was very clear. And I'd ask them about, different questions about their children's attendance. And I'd have teachers say, I'm going to be honest with you. I hope Juanito doesn't come to school, because when he's here, I can't teach. So when he doesn't come to school, I'm much better off. I had teachers tell me things like, these parents don't care about education, so there's only so much you can do with a parent that doesn't care about their child's education. I had another teacher tell me, at the end of the year, when it's time to close down our classes and finalize the grades, the district doesn't give us any extra time to do that. So when kids don't come, we're happy, because we actually have time to do the work that we need to do. So, and I'm not saying there aren't reasons, some legitimate reasons, but there were things to think about. Like, what do we need to do to get around this problem? So that was the research that I focused on. But I'm also a Stanton Fellow. After I left UCLA, I became a Stanton Fellow. And now I'm doing interesting research on how to change behavior around attendance. Because the district is required by law to send a notice of truancy letter when a student has 3 or more unexcused absences. And we send out this standard letter that's awful, I think. I mean, I've tried to change it so it doesn't sound so legal. It's like you're breaking the law and, something like that. And so I'm working with a researcher at Harvard who's very interested in looking at if we send out 3 different types of letters and to see which of those letters has the best impact on changing behavior. And they go from our one that we're using now to some of the letters that are much more parent-friendly. Like, we really care about your child's success. And we know that if they miss school, they're not going to do as well. And things like that. So that's looking more at parents and what will change their behavior with their child based on the letter that they receive. Thank you. Yes?
I was really interested in you talking about the trauma lens and how important it is to have that lens when we're working with youth and with their families. And you also mentioned that there's some staff, some teachers that maybe haven't learned to take that lens on yet and might look at it from a deficit perspective. And I'm wondering what kind of work, since teachers are on the front lines and administrators, what kind of investment is being made in professional development or coaching at the same level we give to Common Core? What kind of investment can we make to make sure teachers see this presentation and learn how to
It's a good question. We have a lot. We offer professional development to teach teachers how to understand students through a traumatic lens. And not just that, but to teach them about resiliency, to teach them about not taking things personally, you know, to look at the child and separate the child from the behavior. We have a lot of things like that. Unfortunately, right now, some of you may know that we have a freeze on all professional development, mainly because of our MISIS crisis. I love the way that sounds, MISIS crisis. I wonder if I'm the only one who says that. But, so we're not doing a lot of professional development right now, but in each of our ESCs, we have mental health specialists and coordinators, and their job is to train schools. Unfortunately, I have to be honest with you that even when we are providing professional development, there is so much pressure on principals to improve test scores that they don't really think, they don't make that connection about the social emotional learning or understanding the trauma that children experience. And we've done studies of the children in our district. Something like, you know, 90% of them have experienced some type of violence in their life, you know, firsthand. So they've had a lot of exposure to violence, but you know, educators are not social workers, and they, you know, they're not, that's not their area of expertise, so they're thinking, what can we do to improve test scores? And we're trying to teach them that, as I said earlier, if you really want to improve your test scores, you have to address the root causes that are preventing children from learning. Okay.
Add to your answer. You know, I've been school-based most of my career, you know, as a school social worker, and I think that when there's hiring freezes and policy, you know, that don't allow, thank you. When there's hiring freezes and policy that doesn't allow us to, you know, train the way we would want to as social workers in terms of the trauma lens, schools get really creative. So I remember doing PDs, you know, during the staff development, you know, they have it once a week. And the principal said, could you talk to the teachers about boys in crisis or whatever was going on, or African American youth, and, you know, or whatever. I mean, whatever the subject was, and, you know, they would give me 20 minutes, but 20 minutes is still 20 minutes. So I feel that the teachers get it, and I feel that, like Dr. Duardo was saying in terms of the leadership, you know, if you have a leader in the school, a principal, assistant principals who get it, we're gonna get, you know, they're gonna get the training, but that's like one school, right? But it's happening, you know, it happens, it's happening.
Other questions? Jane?
Debra, I'm curious, given the size, diversity, complexity of all these programs you have responsibility for, what kind of data do you collect that help you determine the efficacy of these programs? How do you know they're working? How do you know what you need to do to change to improve the programs?
So, you know, a few years back when Dr. Daisy first came to the district, he was very much, you know, data-driven and results-driven. And so we collect data on just about everything that we do. So for the attendance improvement program, we have a base, we have certain targets that we're expected to meet. We're measuring improvements on a monthly basis. We're sending out data, it's very transparent. It applies to all of the programs that we have. We have specific, in fact, one of the things that I really like that Dr. Daisy brought on, and I don't know if they'll continue with Mr. Cortinez, is we have these performance dialogues, where we actually, at every level of the district. So Dr. Daisy would manage these performance dialogues for all of us that were the heads of divisions, and we would look at everything. We would look at attendance, we would look at our mental health services, we would look at our English language learners and their, you know, rate of, what do you call it when they get out of your classification. We're looking at numbers of suspensions, you know, looking at, you name it, just about everything. And for when we're not on target and we're not making the gains or making improvements that we expect to see, then the question is we have to justify it. So in the past, it used to be like, we'd have programs that people would just say, oh, that's a great program. And say, well, how do you know? Well, we just know because everybody likes it and we've been doing it forever. But it's not like that any longer. In order to get ongoing funding, you have to have evidence that your program has some positive outcomes and that, you know, we're tracking kids and looking at their attendance rate, looking at their test scores, looking at lots of other measures to see if they're making gains.
Do you have a research staff that works with your division to help you go over this?
That would be nice. You know, we have our office of what's Cynthia Lim's office called?
Data accountability.
Data and accountability.
Okay.
And we have some people that are able to help us. A lot of it we do ourselves. We have our administrators and counselors that are doing it ourselves. And it's unfortunate, you know, that was the whole idea of having better access to data and being able to run reports. So they do have that. They, you know, now, like I said, everything's off now, but with the My Data system, you could run reports that can show you student level data, school data, classroom data, district-wide data. So some of the stuff you could really pull yourself. Questions?
Other questions?
I have to say, because a lot of times after I speak, people will say like, well, what happened to your son? Is he okay? So I have to say I have an amazing young man who's going to be 35 years old now, who lives independently. He's a quadriplegic, but once he's, you know, has a nurse get him in and out of bed, he's all over the city. He's one day at the Grove, and the next day he's who knows where. He's all over the place, and really independent. And I have to say that a lot of the challenges that I faced, including having a child with a disability, has changed my priorities in life, has made me really appreciate everyday things that sometimes people take for granted, and to take care of yourself, practice self-care, because I know a lot of us in schools and we don't get, you know, we don't get a lot of pats on the back or a lot of people telling us thank you for the work that you do, but I can't tell you how many times I've run into former students that were teen moms, that were kids that had dropped out of school that I brought back, that I run into everywhere. I mean, I'm at the Hollywood Bowl, I'm in Las Vegas, anywhere I go, they're all over the place. And kids that you think that you didn't even do much for will come to you and say, you know, you saved my life, thank you. And I really believe that every interaction that we have with a student should be positive. Even if it's discipline, even if whatever it is, you can discipline someone out of love and not out of judgment and not, you know, because you're trying to get rid of them, and children feel that and they know it and they will do almost anything to make you proud of them. So I hope those of you who are working with children continue the hard work and take care of yourself, because it's hard work, there's no question about it. And thank you for what you do.
Debra, thank you. You really